The day started like any other, until it didn't. I was called into a meeting I thought would be routine, just a quick update, a familiar cadence of small talk and slides. Then, without warning, the words came. "We've decided to move in a different direction with your role." The room felt like it closed in on me, the air thick with the subtle hum of colleagues shifting in their seats. There was no preamble, no private conversation, just the quiet finality of a career pivot landing. Squarely in front of me, shock is a peculiar thing. It makes time stretch. I could feel my mind racing, mapping out every client relationship, every responsibility, every unfinished promise. 35 key clients. Relationships painstakingly nurtured over years. Would they stay loyal? Would they see this as a signal to leave? Fear whispered 1,000 worst-case scenarios, each louder than the last. Yet beneath the panic, a spark of clarity emerged. Termination didn't have to mean defeat. It was a trigger, a test of awareness, strategy, and composure. And as the door closed behind me, I realized something crucial. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And how I chose to respond in the next hours would determine whether this moment became the end of my career or the foundation of something far greater. After the meeting, I found myself alone with my thoughts, replaying every interaction, every decision that had led here. Termination wasn't just a personal setback. It was a challenge to everything I'd built. The instinct was to panic, to make calls, to beg for reassurance. But I knew that reaction would only scatter energy I needed to preserve. Instead, I shifted focus inward. I began mapping out what really mattered. The clients who depended on me, the processes that ran because I ensured they did, the trust I had quietly earned over time. I realized that while my title had been revoked, the relationships and influence I had cultivated remained intact. That was leverage others hadn't fully recognized. This wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about clarity, awareness, and control over what could still be guided. I wrote down every client touchpoint, every dependency, and the steps where my involvement was essential. Each note revealed an underlying truth. Power isn't always in visibility or authority. Often, it lives in patience, preparation, and consistency. By the end of that evening, the initial fear had evolved into a plan. I wasn't reacting, I was strategizing, and the next move would be decisive, calculated, and entirely under my control. The next morning, I began to map the invisible threads that held my client relationships together. On paper, it looked like a smooth, self-sustaining network, contracts signed, deliverables scheduled, meetings on repeat. But beneath the surface, each interaction relied on subtle dependencies. Emails I had flagged, approvals I had coordinated, details I had clarified before anyone even realized they existed. I started seeing the truth. My influence wasn't loud or public. It was quiet, embedded in continuity. 35 clients trusted me not because of titles or official announcements, but because they knew that I understood the nuances that made their operations run without friction. The systems, handoffs, and contingencies were designed around my involvement, yet no one outside those networks fully noticed. This was leverage hidden in plain sight. People assumed that because things were running smoothly, my presence was incidental. But the reality was different. The trust I had earned, the consistency I had delivered, it all mattered far more than any corporate title or spotlight recognition. Understanding this changed everything. I wasn't starting from scratch. I was stepping into a position of quiet authority that others had overlooked. And once I knew where that leverage lived, I could begin shaping the next chapter without forcing anyone's hand. Once I recognized where real leverage lay, the path forward became clear. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was stepping into autonomy. I made the decision to launch my own firm, not impulsively, but strategically, with every detail calculated. The first step was subtle: drafting the framework, defining services, and preparing the messaging. I had no intention of broadcasting it to the world. Every move was measured, because the stakes were enormous. 35 clients, whose loyalty could make or break this venture. The next phase was engagement. I reached out individually to key clients, framing conversations around continuity, due diligence, and shared success rather than my termination. I didn't dramatize the situation, and I didn't seek sympathy. I spoke with calm authority, reminding them, indirectly but clearly, why they had trusted me all along. Each interaction reinforced that their interests would remain intact, that the systems and processes they relied on would continue without disruption. It was a careful balance, bold enough to signal the launch, restrained enough not to trigger doubt or panic. Every question I anticipated, every concern I preemptively addressed, allowed clients to see stability where others expected chaos. By the time the firm officially existed on paper, the relationships were already secure. The momentum had shifted silently, almost invisibly, but decisively. What could have been a frantic scramble became a quiet, controlled transition, one that relied on preparation, trust, and awareness rather than confrontation or noise. Even with preparation, reality had its own rhythm. Some clients hesitated. Emails went unanswered longer than expected. Questions came with subtle caution. It was tempting to over-explain, to chase reassurance, but I knew that would undermine the leverage I had quietly established. My role wasn't to convince, it was to maintain clarity, consistency, and presence. Each interaction became a test of trust. One client asked about timelines, another questioned continuity in operations. I responded calmly with precise details and thoughtful guidance, never overcommitting and never reacting emotionally. Every pause, every deliberate clarification, reminded them that the systems they relied on were intact, and that their stability depended on more than just titles or corporate announcements. What surprised me most was how naturally loyalty resurfaced. The clients who mattered most had already internalized their trust in me. Minor hesitation from others didn't derail anything. It only reinforced that relationships were built on competence, not spectacle. I let them navigate their questions, offering insight where needed, and waited for their confidence to return on its own timeline by focusing on alignment rather than persuasion. I kept the narrative under control. What could have become friction or doubt became a quiet reaffirmation of trust. Slowly but surely, clients accepted the new reality. My departure from the old firm didn't diminish the value they had relied on. It only made it more visible. And with each conversation, the foundation of my new firm solidified, client by client, interaction by interaction. Within weeks, the picture became clear. All 35 key clients had stayed loyal. No dramatics, no public declarations, no desperate appeals. Just consistency, trust, and quiet authority. The firm I had built in parallel to my departure wasn't a gamble anymore, it was a reality. What made it possible wasn't charm or aggression, but the systems of trust and competence I had cultivated over years. Each client had experienced reliability, foresight, and a calm presence that others often missed. That foundation, combined with strategic awareness of dependencies and leverage, ensured that when the old structure fell away, the relationships endured. The victory wasn't flashy. There were no celebrations, no grand announcements. It was measured, precise, and internalized. Every client interaction, every confirmation of confidence, reinforced that the real value had always been in substance, not visibility. And the most remarkable part? The same skills that allowed me to retain clients now positioned the firm for growth by staying deliberate, composed, and aware of where influence truly resided. I transformed a moment of termination into the launch of something stronger. The lesson was unmistakable. Success doesn't always roar. Sometimes it quietly asserts itself, and those who understand leverage and trust see it before anyone else does. Looking back, the story isn't about losing a job or launching a firm. It's about understanding where real influence lives. Power and trust often flow quietly, through relationships, consistency, and competence, rather than through titles, visibility, or forceful actions. Recognizing that early changed everything. One lesson stands out. Pause before reacting. In moments of setback, our instinct is to respond emotionally, to chase reassurance, or to prove ourselves. But true leverage comes from awareness, patience, and precision. Observing, mapping dependencies, and acting deliberately allows situations to reveal their natural momentum, giving you control without confrontation. Another insight: relationships are currency. The clients who stayed weren't loyal because of contracts. They were loyal because trust had been earned over time, quietly, reliably, and without fanfare. Protecting and understanding those relationships was more impactful than any dramatic gesture. Finally, success is often subtle. Triumph doesn't always announce itself loudly. It manifests in recalibrated systems, renewed trust, and opportunities that only appear when you've cultivated awareness and consistency. If there's a takeaway for anyone facing disruption, it's this: the strongest position isn't the one that demands attention. It's the one where your value is undeniable, your presence reliable, and your influence quietly unshakable. And once you reach that position, recognition follows naturally, without force, without drama, and without compromise.